Top, à 0-1 minute.
And now the guests are getting up at the 1 minute mark. Usually they go out early. They go out at 2 minutes. We're in the final 60 seconds. Simon, all that's left to explain is the ignition sequence. What do we look for?
Well, at H0, the DDO will call out Allumage Volcan, the main stage ignition. But at this moment, we don't lift off yet. In fact, there will be 7-second wait. For these 7 full seconds, the computers are checking the performance of this main engine as it's functioning and on the pad. If all is well, then, and only then, the order is given to light the 2 solid rocket boosters. At this point, there's no going back. We will be off.
We're off in a minute. We're going to cut away, let you hear the DDO, call out the final countdown. Enjoy the launch, everybody.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain. Allumage EAP, décollage. Tous les paramètres à bord sont nominaux.
And so we are underway. Did you see at 18:52 local time and right on time, Ariane 5 began her mission, lifting off beautifully, showing a lot of power right from the ground here in French Guiana with a lot of fire, beginning her second mission of the year, the 20-ton ATV going to the International Space Station. Beautiful shots, always impressive for the people at the observation sites around the base, in their cars or on the beaches. Ariane lifting off in her trail of gold. She's making a turn now. She's going to pass overhead.
We're about 15 kilometers from a launch pad, and even here you can still feel the sensation of launch. But if you're watching from that close viewing station, which is only 5 kilometers away, you can really experience that sensation of the acoustic noise from those 2 solid rocket boosters, as they provide right now 90% of the thrust, propelling the launch along its trajectory at ever higher velocity. It really is quite sensational to witness there in Toucan.
How many launches have you witnessed?
I've been fortunate to witness 2 from there, plus tonight from here.
777 tons is Ariane's weight at liftoff. The DDO is saying that everything is okay on board. She's burning, if you can believe it, 5 tons of fuel every second. 5 tons of fuel every second. 2.5 tons in each booster, plus the core stage, the lower stage, burning another 300 kilos per second. The launcher now following the program in the onboard computer, which gives all the orders, including stage separations, which we'll soon begin to see. We are in the first of 4 flight phases. We'll describe each in turn so you can follow Ariane. Right now, the first flight phase, the single Vulcan core stage burning with the boosters. The boosters are going to burn for another 4 or 5 seconds, and then they will be extinguished, and you'll see them probably, looks like the extinction of the boosters. You can see them falling away on either side. The orange lights are the boosters flaming out, and the single point of light in the middle of your screen is Ariane continuing to burn.
Yes, the DDO has announced the separation of the 2 solid rocket boosters, and coming at a time at 65 kilometers in altitude.
Take a look, Simon, at the left side of your screen. On the upper left, you have the cursor crawling up a line. Below that, some letters and some numbers, A and V. Can you explain?
Yes, so looking at this screen, this is Ariane's trajectory. It's showing us how the flight is progressing. The curve, it's a computer simulation of the actual trajectory. And that white dot on the curve, this is the actual position of the launch vehicle right now.
There are actually 2 trajectories. One is the optimal trajectory and the real-time trajectory. As long as we're one on top of the other, we're right where we should be, right?
Exactly. Superimposed, perfect. So the V means velocity, and right now we are traveling at 2.4 kilometers per second. And the A, this is the altitude. So now we're at 106 kilometers already.
We're out of the Earth's atmosphere, or will be shortly, which means the fairing can be jettisoned. There it is, coming right on time at about 110 kilos. We're using a new fairing separation system tonight, aren't we?
That's right. And in the past few years, Arianespace in Switzerland, the Ariane 5 fairing manufacturer, they have been developing a new system to support the fairing separation event. In this new system, with the aid of pyrotechnics, the fairing first separates from the Ariane around its circular base.
Happens very, very quickly, doesn't it?
Very quickly indeed, 56 milliseconds to be precise. And during this time of separation, it's aided by a series of very precisely tuned springs around the body of Ariane.
So at this point, we can say the fairing has been separated.
Only by a few millimeters, Mo. Then a command is sent to separate the fairing two halves. The whole event is over in less than 100 milliseconds.
Now, they wanted also a new design, a shock reduction system, a low shock fairing.
Yes, exactly. The whole concept, this endeavors to minimize the shock environment transmitted to the Ariane's passengers. Today, it's the first mission of this system, so a special hello to the whole work team in Switzerland.
The new shock reduction system was 5 years in the making. The fairing separated first horizontally, then pushed up and away laterally. We're in the second powered flight phase, the single core engine burning. Simon, what's the role of the single core stage?
Well, the EPC, this is the main cryogenic stage, and it, for some details, it's 5.4 meters in diameter and it's 31 meters long. It's powered by one Vulcan 2 engine that burns liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. The Vulcan 2 engine provides up to 1,400,000 newtons of thrust in the vacuum of space, and its nozzle, it's gimbaled to provide pitch and yaw control for the Ariane vehicle.
We're doing fine on board, Ariane performing flawlessly. More of the mission in a moment, but for now, the latest news from Arianespace.
And back here in the flight control room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Jerry Jason, the lead flight director for this ATV-4 mission of the Albert Einstein, on console at this hour, as he will be on docking day on June 15th, now that the Albert Einstein is on its way. We're 5 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Everything continuing to go very well. The first stage cutoff and separation of that initial stage, which is known by the acronym of EPC, as it is called, which is the Étage Principal Cryotechnique. That first stage will drop away. You're looking right now at the visiting vehicle officer, Brian Lohman, here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, seated behind a model of the automated transfer vehicle. Lohman will be working with his counterparts at the ATV Control Center in Toulouse, France, over the next 10 days to monitor the progress of the automated transfer vehicle as it proceeds towards its link-up with the aft port of the Zvezda service module on June 15th. That docking is now scheduled on Saturday, June 15th at 8:46 a.m. Central Time. We'll be providing live coverage of the docking of the ATV-4 to the International Space Station beginning at 7 a.m. Central Time on Saturday, June 15th. As we mentioned at the top of our broadcast, it will take about 1 hour, 38 minutes between launch and the time the solar arrays are deployed, as well as the proximity link boom that is necessary for the transmission of data for the ATV-4's final approach to the International Space Station. With that, we'll be returning now down to the Jupiter Control Center in Kourou, French Guiana, with the Ariane 5 having been launched on time and the ATV-4 on its way for more coverage from Arianespace of the flight of Albert Einstein.
By sites in Australia. We won't be here for the acquisition of Perth.
No, this comes at 2 hours and 24 minutes into the mission, but Ariane will be tracked by the others during this broadcast.
All of her trajectory has been designed to be followed from the ground, whether by land or by sea. The launcher sending radar and telemetry back, and the network of stations keep constant watch on her vital systems. What is telemetry, Simon?
Well, basically, the telemetry is the launch vehicle data that is being monitored, collected, and transmitted back to the ground stations. In fact, there are over 1,500 parameters to measure, all indicators of the Ariane's health and performance during flight.
1,500 parameters. What kind of parameters?
Well, parameters such as the tank pressure that confirms the nominal status of the propulsion. We've got gyro data that confirms the nominal orientation and attitude of a launch vehicle along its trajectory. There are also accelerometers, strain gauges, and temperature sensors throughout.
And they're supposed to record all of her functions?
Yes, motor ignitions, for example, stage separations, motor shutdowns, all aspects like this.
Now, some of this data is analyzed in real time, being analyzed right now, and others are analyzed after the flight.
Yes, this is how we validate how the vehicle has performed. So you can imagine the enormous archives of data which we've accumulated.
We're waiting for confirmation of the extension of the lower stage burn. That should be coming up right now. There it is on the screen. We have often a couple of seconds delay as the telemetry comes in. There we have the DDO has confirmed the cutoff of the lower stage engine and the separation of the lower stage, and as you saw, the ignition of the upper stage. These are 3 commands given by the onboard computer in about 12 seconds. We're into the upper stage burn, the next powered flight phase. What's the role of the upper stage, would you say?
Well, we call this the EPS, and the EPS, it's a storable propellant upper stage. This is responsible for providing the additional final velocity needed to inject the payload, the ATV, onto its specified orbit. The EPS will now burn 5 tons of propellant for the next 490 seconds or so in this first burn.
490 seconds, roughly 8 minutes. Compare that with the Ariane 5, the ECA version, the other version?
Well, in the EPC, the previous stage, and also the ECA configuration, we were burning cryogenic propellants. In this EPS, we are burning monomethyl hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide.
I couldn't pronounce that. No.
This is a storable, reliable propellant for this configuration. The fact that we were not burning cryogenic propellants on this upper stage, that's why maybe some of the viewers would have seen leading up to the launch, we did not need those visible yellow cryogenic arms on the upper part of the launch table.
We're choosing this configuration called the ES tonight because for this mission's particular needs, the EPS is the most efficient means to do the job. And we've used it before, right?
Yes, it's a configuration we've used previously on the other ATV missions, and we'll continue to use this on the Galileo missions due to fly on Ariane starting December 2014.
We had a look at the launch zone before liftoff. Our camera is going to go up now to the CVI, another center of action, the Immediate Visual Control Center. What's going on here?
Well, the CVI, this is a facility located south of CSG and up high on a hill with excellent exposure for all the range activities. And it comprises all the means for receiving, processing and storing all the telemetry we spoke about before. Right now, there are a number of people following and analyzing all the key flight data, and they are in real-time contact, reporting the flight status directly to the team here in Mission Control. And remember, Mission Control is the nerve center that is in contact with all the needed facilities throughout the range.
Right, and all their information comes in here to the DDO, who calls out the results. There used to be, I think, a deferred visual control center used for Ariane 4, but they don't use it anymore. There are different propulsion systems on Ariane 5. Is it fair to say, Simon, cryogenics are more efficient than solids? Basically, correct me if I'm wrong, solids are for getting us off the ground, brute force, away from the pull of the Earth. Cryogenics, more sophisticated, used for precision orienting of a vehicle, and of course they're reignitable.
Yes, we could say this. And on this ES configuration, we started with the cryogenic main stage, 170 tons of liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, burned for 540 seconds or so. In propulsive efficiency terms, it's the best.
But the boosters in the first flight phase, that's a whole different system. That's a solid system.
Yes, there were the 2 SRBs, 240 tons of solid propellant per booster, and they each burn 130 seconds or so. They each provide 7 million newtons worth of thrust during the early phase of this flight. That's 90% of the propulsive force. Then there's this the EPS upper stage we spoke about before. This has the responsibility for delivery of the ATV to the correct orbit on which the ATV can start its independent mission to the International Space Station.
In our next film, we're going to continue in our ongoing series highlighting the different professions here at the Space Base. Tonight, Ambra Pedrassini on her role as Fluid Systems Specialist.
And once again, while Arianespace rolls that feature package, we're back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room for the next few minutes. The flight control team here, led by Flight Director Jerry Jason, watching the sequence of events as the Albert Einstein automated transfer vehicle heads uphill toward its preliminary orbit and a rendezvous with the International Space Station 10 days from now. The sequence of events from this point on, in about 4 minutes, the first of these 2 burns of the storable propellant stage, or the second stage, if you will, will come to an end, and then the ATV will be placed in a 42-minute coast phase that will result in a second boost ignition, as it is termed, a 28-second burn to circularize the orbit of the automated transfer vehicle and set the stage for the separation of the spacecraft itself from the second stage. Once the ATV has separated from the upper stage, a few minutes will go by before the computer on the Albert Einstein will command the deployment of the solar arrays, which takes about 10 minutes to complete. Those solar arrays will deploy in a dragonfly-shaped fashion, basically an X shape of those 4 solar arrays, which from tip to tip measures 73 feet in length. Jerry Jason has been talking to his counterparts at the Automated Transfer Vehicle Control Center in Toulouse, France. You're looking at a live picture across the Atlantic. These are the folks that will take over the control of the operation of the spacecraft from the time of solar array deployment until the docking day, which is coming up on June 15th. The final phase of the rendezvous and the approach for docking of the Albert Einstein to the aft port of the Zvezda service module comes in various increments. They are called S hold points. That's the terminology that ESA uses for the final rendezvous phase of the approach of the Albert Einstein for its link up to the Russian segment of the International Space Station. ESA will be working in tandem with the Russian flight control team in Korolyov outside of Moscow at various points, hold points, if you will. The first will come at a point 2.1 miles away from the station. The next will be a critical point, the S3 hold point, where the ATV will stop, put on the brakes just 820 feet away from the International Space Station, and that will be the moment of truth, at which point the videometers and the telegoniometers on the forward end of the automated transfer vehicle will begin to lock on to retroreflectors on the aft end of the service module to make sure that they can communicate properly for the final phase of the approach and link up to the Zvezda service module. With that, let's go back to Kourou, French Guiana, and continuing coverage by Arianespace of the flight of the Albert Einstein to orbit.
Very first ATV, since she had to undergo a series of what they call docking days, a lot of tests and dry runs to make sure the new system was working properly. So a couple of weeks went by before the first ATV was ready to dock in 2008, but since then it's been a quick trip up.
Yes, and all the maneuvers are followed very carefully by the team in a specially built ATV control center in Toulouse, southwest France. And towards the end of this broadcast, we'll be visiting the teams in this facility to learn about their role in following this sophisticated International Space Station cargo freighter and its operations.
And once the ATV has docked, it'll stay there for 6 months until the 11th of October. It's re-entry planned for the 15th. But in the meantime, what's going to do for 6 months up there, Simon?
Well, it's Europe's contribution to the what we call the logistics servicing of the International Space Station. The ATV-4, like its predecessors, will be delivering cargo in a pressurized environment. It will also be delivering water, gas, and International Space Station propellant. It also provides an International Space Station reboost capability, a reboost to a higher orbit, even attitude control, and at the end of a mission, it will serve as a waste disposal.
And we'll talk about that in detail in a minute. We're coming up on extinction of the first upper stage burn, and you'll hear the DDO call out that milestone. There you can see the nozzle shutting off.
Première extinction de l'étage supérieur EPS sur commande de guidage.
And the DDO is just called out. We're now in a coasting phase, also called free flying. What's happening?
Well, with the first burn of the EPS, we have now placed the configuration, that's the ATV and the EPS upper stage, on its correct path towards the separation orbit. And now, at this velocity of nearly 8 kilometers per second and at the altitude of 150 kilometers, we can simply leave a configuration in the driving hands of the laws of physics.
So we don't need any propulsion?
No propulsion required. We'll continue in this coast phase for the next 40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Then we will ignite the EPS to place the ATV precisely in the correct orbit needed before separation.
After this phase, we'll have the second ignition of the upper stage. That's a short one, lasting just under half a minute. There'll be a third upper stage burn, but we won't see that. It'll come at about 2 hours and almost 2 hours and a half into the mission at an altitude of about 260 kilometers. We have a next film coming up. What are we going to see?
We're going to go to a series of launch replays now, and you can relive again those exciting moments as the Ariane left her pad nearly 20 minutes ago.
ATV powering off the ground, as you might recall. Those mighty engines, 5 tons of fuel burning per second, lifting her out of the atmosphere, away from the Earth's gravity. Well, as she began her mission, that was just nearly 20 minutes ago. We'll have other replays coming up before the mission is over tonight. And you can see from different vantage points, there are a number of observation sites here across the space base. And we have our cameras set up in different areas. That was the booster separation. We don't often get to see that, Simon, with the naked eye, when the boosters can flame out.
No, that's very impressive for people in the sites across the base here.
The ATV is bringing supplies, but it will also reboost the station. Now, you mentioned that. Now, last year, the ATV-3 reboosted ISS by some 40 kilometers. Why do we need the ATV to reboost the ISS?
Well, at these high orbits, it will need and use less fuel to maintain its orbit, consequently reducing the amount of fuel that will need to be sent up on other missions. Even at the orbital altitude of approximately 400 kilometers, there still remains a very, very, very tenuous atmosphere of gas that acts as a drag on the International Space Station.
And it's this drag, if I understand correctly, that slows the station down and drops it more towards the Earth. Is that right?
That's right, and it's not what we want. So reboost capability, it corrects for